Saint Thomas the Apostle, also known as Didymus, Greek for twin, was likely born in Galilee, though the exact date and place remain uncertain. The designation twin appears to be in both John chapter 11 verse 16 and John 20th verse 24, indicating he may have had a twin sibling, though this individual is never named. Thomas was of Jewish heritage, living in a region heavily influenced by Hellenistic and Roman culture under the Roman occupation of Judea in the 1st century CE. Thomas was selected by Jesus of Nazareth as one of the 12 apostles, his closest disciples, tasked with spreading his teachings. He is first listed among the 12 in Matthew chapter 10 verse 3, Mark chapter 3 verse 18, Luke chapter 6 verse 15, and Acts chapter 1 verse 13. Thomas is renowned the most for his analytical nature, often questioning rather than accepting blindly. His most famous moment comes in John chapter 20, verse 24 to 29, after Jesus' resurrection, when he doubted the appearance of the risen Christ until he could see and touch Christ's wounds, a moment that gave rise to the term Doubting Thomas. In John chapter 11, verse 16, when Jesus decides to return to Judea to raise Lazarus, Thomas boldly says, "Let us also go, that we may die with him," revealing a complex character, loyal yet pessimistic. While as in John chapter 14, verse 5, during the Last Supper, Thomas questions Jesus' statement about going to prepare a place for the disciples, prompting Jesus' reply, "I am the way and the truth and the life." In John chapter 20, verse 24 to 29, after Jesus' resurrection, Thomas is absent from the initial appearance. A week later, Christ appears again and invites Thomas to touch his wounds. Thomas responds, "My Lord and my God," making one of the strongest affirmations of Christ's divinity in the New Testament. After the ascension of Jesus around the year 30 to 33 CE, tradition holds that Thomas traveled farther than any of the other apostles to spread the Christian message. According to early Christian writers, the apocryphal texts, especially the Acts of Thomas, written in the 3rd century, Thomas journeyed eastward, including to the Parthian Empire, according to the Eusebius of Caesarea and Origen. Thomas evangelized in Parthia, a region in modern-day northeastern Iran. He also went to Bactria, modern-day Afghanistan. Syrian Christian traditions mention his brief presence here before moving further east. Thomas also went to India. The most enduring tradition holds that Thomas arrived in India in 52 CE, landing at Muziris on the Malabar coast, modern-day Kerala. In India, Thomas is credited for founding 7.5 churches known as Israpalikal in Kerala. He converted many, including members of the Brahman and merchant classes. He also ordained clergy, introduced Syriac Christian liturgy. His Indian mission was supported by local kings, notably King Godofars identified with the Hindu Parthian ruler Gunafar, who ruled parts of Gandhara, and is also mentioned in the Acts of Thomas. A significant episode describes Thomas's role as an architect for the king and his miraculous activities, including healings and exorcisms. St. Thomas was martyred, however, around 72 CE near Milapore, in present-day Chennai, Madras, in Tamil Nadu, India. According to tradition, he was unalived with a spear or lance while playing on a hill now known as St. Thomas Mount. His body was interred in Milapore, and the site became an important Christian pilgrimage destination. His tomb is now housed at San Tome Basilica, built by Portuguese missionaries in the 16th century. In the early centuries following his passing, some of Thomas's relics were reportedly moved by merchants or missionaries to Edessa, modern-day Sanliurfa, Turkey, a major center of early Syriac Christianity. This transfer is referenced in the Doctrine of the Apostles and the Chronicle of Edessa in the 4th century. Later, some of these relics were believed to have reached Chios in Greece and eventually Ortona in Italy, where a shrine was established in 1258 CE and continues to be a pilgrimage site. Several non-canonical texts are attributed or associated with Thomas, which includes the Gospel of Thomas, a Sayan's Gospel discovered in Nag Hammadi Library in 1945, consisted of 114 logia or sayings attributed to Jesus. Though non-canonical, it is a great interest of scholars due to the early origins, possibly 1st or 2nd century CE. There is also the Acts of Thomas, a 3rd century Syriac text chronicling his mission to India, full of symbolic language, miracles, and dramatic conversion stories. Finally, there's the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, not related to the apostle but often confused due to the shared name. Thomas is considered the founder of Christianity in India, particularly among the St. Thomas Christians, also called Nasranis, in Kerala. His feast day is observed on July 3rd in the Roman Catholic Church, post-Vatican II calendar. His feast day is December 21st in traditional Roman calendar and Anglican Church, while as Eastern Orthodox Church, along with all apostles, is October 6th. Thomas is the patron saint of India, architects, the blind, and skeptics. His old story resonates through centuries of his profound emphasis on faith through doubt, mission beyond borders, and martyrdom for conviction. Thomas has been portrayed in religious art since the early Christian era. Common iconography includes the builder's square or spear, symbols of professions and martyrdom, scenes of the incredulity of St. Thomas, notably painted by Caravaggio in 1602, Guercino, and Rembrandt. Indian Christian art frequently features Thomas preaching or being martyred on a hill. In conclusion, St. Thomas the Apostle stands as a figure of profound complexity, skeptical yet deeply faithful, introspective yet fearless in mission. His journeys, particularly in India, illustrates the vast reach of early Christianity and the diversity of its expression. His theological significance, rooted in personal transformation, continues to inspire Christian reflection on belief, evidence, and devotion across traditions. St. Thomas is traditionally depicted in Christian art through a set of unique visual attributes that distinguish him from other apostles. These attributes reflect his identity, theological significance, and martyrdom. The spear or lance. This is the primary symbol associated with Thomas, references his martyrdom in India. There's also the builder's square or set square, which represents Thomas's architectural association, particularly from the apocryphal Acts of Thomas, where he is commissioned to build a palace for King Godofaz. Certain important gestures in his iconography include touching Christ's side. In scenes of the incredulity, Thomas is shown often placing his hands or fingers into the wounds or on them of Christ's side. He also is shown with raised hand in wonder or blessing. This suggests his astonishment and eventual declaration of faith, my Lord and my God. His attire and general appearance include typically apostolic robes, long tunic, and himation or cloak, often in deep reds or greens. He is also shorn with a beard, youthful to middle-aged. He is usually portrayed with a short or medium beard and shoulder-length hair, younger than Peter but older than John. Several specific biblical and apocryphal events show major scenes and events involving Thomas are repeatedly depicted in various media. Each scene conveys a particular theological or missionary theme. The first one is the incredulity of Thomas. It is canonically based on John chapter 20, verse 24 to 29. Important visual elements include Christ guiding Thomas's hand to his wound. It emphasizes the faith confirmed through tactile encounter. Notable artworks include works from Caravaggio, The Incredulity of St. Thomas, made sometime in 1601 to 1602. It is now in the Sanssouci Gallery in Potsdam. There's also the work of Guercino called The Incredulity of St. Thomas, made in 1621, found in Pinacoteca di Brera in Milan. Rembrandt also made a work named also The Incredulity of St. Thomas in 1634, and it is in a private collection. There's also scenes in his iconography of his missions to India, and this is based also on the acrophilic sources, especially the Acts of St. Thomas. Visual themes include Thomas preaching to Indian nobility or performing baptisms. The typical setting often includes exotic landscapes, Indian architecture, and multicultural audiences. These scenes are depicted in frescoes in Syrian churches, such as the Malankara church interiors in Kerala. There's also the 17th century Portuguese colonial carvings in the San Thome Basilica in Chennai. Other scenes include the martyrdom of St. Thomas, often showing Thomas being struck with a spear while praying. The location reference is often situated on a hill or near the sea, often depicting St. Thomas Mount. There are some cultural variations to the scene, however. Indian depictions often integrate local flora and architecture. Peter Paul Rubin has depicted the scene in his work Martyrdom of St. Thomas, circa 1611-1612. This painting is in private collection but may have been lost. There are known copies and sketches of it, however. There are scenes, of course, of the resurrection in the upper room. This is distinct from the incredulity scene. This shows Christ's general post-resurrection appearance to the apostle, with Thomas included. It is depicted as one of the later arrivals, either surprised or kneeling. There are, of course, many regional iconographic traditions showing St. Thomas. In the Byzantine and Eastern Orthodox icon, there's often flat stylization with golden background, frontal pose, and elongated form. There's a typical inscription labeled with the name of St. Thomas as symbols of the scroll denoting gospel preaching, and feast icons, often part of the 12 great feasts, especially the Sunday of St. Thomas. In the Syriac and Indian Christian art, there are many distinctive features that incorporate the Indian garments, temples, elephants, and local rulers. Often in this art, wood carvings, murals, and metal reliefs are used. Popular sites include churches in Kerala, such as St. Mary's Orthodox Syrian Church in Kotayama. In Western European medieval and Renaissance art, altarpiece inclusions, often placed in polyptychs, which with other apostles, show St. Thomas. In Gothic and Baroque representations, there's more of an emphasis on dramatic emotion and movement. There are, of course, also many manuscript illuminations which are found in books of hours, including Très riche art from the Duc de Berry. There are also many architectural and sculptural depictions of St. Thomas. These include Gothic cathedrals with Thomas, where Thomas appears among the statues of apostles on portals, including the cathedrals, the cathedrals in France, and in Renaissance works such as Donatello's Apostles for Or San Michele in Florence originally included Thomas, though some attributes are disputed. There are, of course, many stained glass elements that include St. Thomas. This is common in the 13th to 16th centuries churches, often illustrating the incredulity scene. An example of this is the York Minster in England, where the Thomas panel from the Tree of Jesse window. There are many relief carvings and icons as well that include them, including the St. Thome Basilica in Chennai. It houses contemporary and colonial reliefs of the saints' Indian ministry and martyrdom. the Ortona Cathedral in Italy, where the tomb reliefs depicted Thomas's relic transfer. There are many symbolic and emblematic representations of St. Thomas as well. Beyond narrative scenes, Thomas is often represented through symbolic abstractions, one of which is the twin symbols. This is rarely used, however, two overlapping male figures can be seen. Also used is the compass or architect's tools as representation of the Thomas as a spiritual architect. Some often show open wound or a finger, emphasizes empirical faith. Lastly, a book or gospel scroll denoting apostolic authority of St. Thomas. In more modern representations, including film and digital media, there are many documentaries and religious dramas that feature Thomas's journey to India, especially among Indian Christian communities. There are also virtual and NFT religious art. Emergent digital platforms have begun rendering iconography of the apostles, including stylized interpretations of St. Thomas. In contemporary religious art, Indian Christian artists such as C.K. Ramakrishnan and Angela Sheryan have created modern devotional paintings of St. Thomas, integrating post-colonial and local identity themes. In public memorials, a bronze statue of St. Thomas stands at St. Thomas Mount in Chennai. There are, of course, many commemorative artistic liturgical uses, including liturgical banners and vestments used during Thomas's feast days, particularly in Indian Christian rites and Orthodox celebration. There are, of course, many liturgical artifacts with St. Thomas being depicted, including chalices and altar cloths embroidered with the lance or square symbol. The iconography of St. Thomas the Apostle is among the most diverse in Christian tradition, ranging from Western masterpieces of Baroque drama to culturally integrated Indian depictions rich with local motifs. His unique theological identity as the Apostle who doubted, questioned, and ultimately professed the divinity of Christ with fervor has made his visual legacy both spiritually resonant and artistically fertile across centuries and continents. Here is the canonization process for St. Thomas the Apostle. First and foremost, it's important to understand the context of canonization, especially seeing as the process was different back when St. Thomas himself was canonized. St. Thomas the Apostle was venerated first and foremost as a saint long before the formal canonization process of the Roman Catholic Church existed. In the first few centuries of Christianity, sainthood was conferred by public acclamation, especially for apostles and martyrs. Their holiness was recognized by local Christian communities, episcopal authority, and liturgical commemoration, rather than by papal decree. The apostolic role as one of the 12 apostles, directly chosen by Jesus, Thomas was regarded as a sanctified figure by default. His martyrdom, thus his death by spear in Milapore, India, around 72 CE, contributed to this early status as a martyr and saint. There was also devotional practices at his tomb in India and later around his relics in Edessa, which reinforced his sanctity. By the 3rd century CE, there was an established cult in Edessa. According to Syriac sources, notably the Doctrine of the Apostles, the relics of St. Thomas were transferred from Milapore to Edessa, modern-day Zaliufor, in Turkey by Christian merchants or missionaries. His feast day was celebrated on July 3rd, which eventually spread to the Eastern churches. Poets like Saint Ephrem the Syrian from 306 to 373 CE composed hymns in honor of St. Thomas, indicating a flourishing local cult. His feast day was also integrated into the Eastern Christian calendars. By the 4th century, St. Thomas's feast day had been established in the Eastern Orthodox Syriac and Malankara liturgic calendars, reflecting widespread acceptance of his sainthood across Greek and Semitic-speaking Christian world. In the Orthodox churches, his feast day is celebrated on October 6th. In Syriac churches, they maintain local feasts, especially among Indian Christians. Thomas became central to East Syrian theology, often referred to as the Apostle of the East, particularly in connection to the Church of the East, later mischaracterized as Nestorian. Western recognition and medieval liturgical integration also adopted his feast day and sainthood. Thomas's feast was observed in Roman Rite by at least the 8th century, signifying recognition in the Latin Church. His feast day was established on the 21st of December, pre-Vatican II Roman calendar. This date was chosen due to the association with the Advent themes of faith, doubt, and revelation. Thomas was also included in Latin martyrologies in hagiographical sources, including the Martyrologium Hieronymium in the early 6th century, as well as the Roman Martyrology in later editions from Gregory XIII Reform 1584 and onward. With the relic translation and Western pilgrimage in Ortona, Italy, 1258 CE, this contributed to his sanctity. Thomas's relics were reported to be rediscovered or transferred to Ortona, a port town on the Adriatic coast of Italy, possibly brought there by crusaders or merchants from the east. The cult occurs at the Basilica St. Thomas in Ortona, was established to house his relics. This translation of relics was commemorated by Latin churches, further affirming his long-standing veneration. The post-Tridentine codification further affirmed his sanctity. The Council of Trent and liturgical reaffirmation from 1545 to 1563 had an impact on apostolic feasts. The Council of Trent, part of the Catholic Reformation, reaffirmed the importance of apostolic saints like St. Thomas. The Tridentine Missal in 1570 included his feast on December 21st, consolidating earlier medieval practices. Catholic artists and scholars such as Caesar Baronius, Jacobus de Voragine, and Gian Lorenzo Bernini, through his altar designs, contributed to the uniform imagery and liturgical devotion. Modern-day liturgical revisions also had an impact on the sanctity of St. Thomas. The Vatican II reforms in 1969 shifted the feast day. In 1969, the Roman calendar reform, the Feast of St. Thomas, was moved from December 21st to July 3rd to align with the ancient Syriac tradition and translation of his relics to Edessa. The reasoning for this was a more of an emphasis on global Christianity, recognition of non-European apostolic missions, and a restoration of ecumenical and historical authenticity. The canonical status in church law also is important to note in the canonization process of St. Thomas. Many have inferred an automatic sainthood of the apostle. The doctrinal principle of this is that in Catholic theology and canon law, the 12 apostles were considered pre-canonized saints. Their sanctity was recognized by the witnessing of Christ's resurrection, their martyrdom or apostolic labor, and inclusion by early creeds and liturgical calendars. Consequently, many felt that there was no need for papal canonization. St. Thomas was never formally canonized by a pope because the official canonization process only began in the 10th century under Pope John XV. By then, Thomas had already been venerated for over 900 years. Of course, Catholic Church is not the only church that recognizes St. Thomas as a saint. There are many other Christian traditions, including the Anglican and Lutheran calendars. For the Anglican Communion, it observes December 21st as a lesser festival in the Book Common Prayer and Common Worship, while as for the Lutheran churches, it includes Thomas in various regional calendars, typically December 21st as well, but retaining Reformation-era liturgical elements while honoring apostolic traditions. In conclusion, the canonization of St. Thomas the Apostle unfolded organically over centuries, shaped by earlier martyr cults, liturgical incorporation, relic veneration, and ecclesiastical consensus across diverse branches of Christianity. His sainthood was affirmed by the 3rd century by public veneration in Edessa, through Eastern and Western liturgical calendars by the early medieval period, as well as via post-Tridentine standardization and modern liturgical reforms. Though not canonized through the later formal papal process, his inclusion among the 12 apostles, presence in a universal liturgy, and global patronage confirm the pre-congregation canonization as a universal and foundational Christian saint.